Good evening and welcome back to the Weekend Prime Time. We begin this hour with Republicans increasingly fed up with Attorney General Pam Bondi over the Epstein files. Here's what Republican Congressman Thomas Massie said just this morning.
Do you still have confidence in Pam Bondi as Attorney General?
I don't think Pam Bondi has confidence in Pam Bondi. No, I don't have confidence in her. She hasn't got any sort of accountability there at the DOJ.
Ouch. That comes after Bondi clashed with lawmakers this week over her handling of the Epstein files, including this startling moment between Bondi and our next guest, Vermont Congresswoman Becca Balint. Watch.
Do the right thing, Attorney General. Meet with the survivors. They have been asking for a year. Meet with the survivors. Do the right thing.
Didn't ask Merrick Garland anything about Epstein, not once when he was.
Weak sauce.
And also, I want the record to reflect that, with this anti-Semitic culture right now, she voted against a resolution condemning.
Oh,
is
Jewish.
I just want to be clear.
Do you want to go there, Attorney General? Or do you want to go there? Are you serious? Talking about anti-Semitism to a woman who lost her grandfather in the Holocaust.
Congresswoman Becca Balint joins us now. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us. I want to begin, actually, with the unredacted files that you and your colleagues got a chance to look at last week and the subsequent allegations of spying by DOJ officials that followed. What tipped you off to all of this? Was it apparent in the moment when you were looking at these files that something shady was happening?
Yeah, so the whole thing from the beginning seemed shady, from the fact that they were changing the rules on us about what we could bring in. First, we could bring in our notes, then we couldn't. Then we could bring in sticky notes, then we couldn't. Then we had minders. So there's 4 computers in there. In a small little room, you have a minder sitting right next to you watching everything you're doing. And then if you noticed, they had a discrete login for each of us. So that was concerning to me because I wanted to make sure that they weren't able to print out our searches. But it turns out that's exactly what they were doing. And we saw that in the hearing. They had a copy of Pramila Jayapal's, my colleague Pramila Jayapal's searches that she had done. And actually, before I left my office on the Hill to go to DOJ, one of my staffers who's been on the Hill for a long time, she said, I can't believe I'm going to say this to you, but I need you to assume you're being surveilled. And she was right. And it goes along with everything that this administration has shown us in terms of how they're conducting DHS. It goes along with what people in the field are saying in terms of what ICE officers are saying to them about American citizens being tracked. But certainly I never thought my own Department of Justice in the executive branch would be spying on the legislative branch. It's very chilling.
Congresswoman, I want to go back to that last exchange that we just heard there in the clip that Catherine played between you and Attorney General Bondi. Your grandfather was murdered by Nazis. And then it seems somehow she's trying to tie your desire to know more about what happened to these victims, these survivors, to anti-Semitism. Can you just break down for us what the heck you think was going on there?
So 2 things were going on there. We knew based on her behavior in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee that she was going to come with a list of insults. And I suppose it's to my credit that she didn't have a whole lot of dirt on me that she could bring forward in her so-called burn book. But she went really low. And, certainly her staffers were looking up my votes, and they decided that I voted against one particular anti-Semitism resolution because I didn't agree with the wording of it. We've voted on dozens of them. And this was the thing that she pulled out. And when I came back, certainly it was outrageous in every possible way. And I kept my patience for as long as I could. The entire time she was there, she did not acknowledge the survivors. She did not show up prepared to answer our questions. And it was Darvo the entire time. So it was deflect, attack, and then reverse the victim and the oppressor. And to see her doing that in front of the victims of this horrible sex trafficking ring was just too much for me. And to see that what she was trying to accuse me of was anti-Semitism, of course, I lost it. But the other piece, I think, is based on what I was saying at the top. They were spying on us. So she knew, presumably, that I was looking at the records for Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick also happens to be of Jewish descent. Was this their way to try to discredit me and the line of questioning that I had? I don't know. But it certainly struck me as incredibly creepy and outrageous, frankly.
Well, Congresswoman, I actually wanted to ask you about your line of questioning with regards to Commerce Secretary Lutnick, who was Jeffrey Epstein's neighbor and even had some business dealings with him. And he is the highest ranking member of the Trump administration to be just pretty mentioned quite frequently in the Epstein files. And Attorney General Bondi, she said that Lutnick had answered for it. And, you know, he's a good friend of Donald Trump. Unlike other officials in the UK or around the world, it seems as if there just aren't consequences in the United States. Is there any way, do you think, to pursue this further with regards to Lutnick?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think we have to. He appeared to have lied in earlier exchanges with Congress, saying that he had cut off all ties with Jeffrey Epstein back in 2005. Now we know that absolutely wasn't true. They had business dealings together. And then it turns out, actually, he went to Epstein's island. I would have thought the DOJ would be interested in asking him, what did you see while you were there? You had said, back in 2005 that you thought that what was going on at his apartment next door was not on the up and up, and it gave you the creeps. You said that to your wife, and then you decide to go to the island. And so you would think, if the Department of Justice was doing what they said they were doing, which is, following these leads, they would want to have a sit down with him. And what she essentially said was, well, whatever he said the other day is good enough for me. And it is seeming to many of us now, as we go deeper into these files, it feels like this is the Epstein administration. There are so many people in here who had ties to this man, who wanted to continue their dealings with him even after he had been a sex offender, a registered sex offender, and they continued to have their interactions with him. And I think this is why we think there's a cover up, why we believe that the president is not actually interested in getting to the bottom of this, because it's all so intertwined. And so we have to keep asking these questions. And if this secretary, I almost called her secretary again. You see what's happening to me now. I'm so frustrated with her. If the attorney general will not ask these questions, we're going to keep track of all of the ways in which this administration has been lying to us. And when we get subpoena power, we're going to use them.
Congresswoman, since you did get to see those files and the redactions that, the general public isn't privy to, how would you categorize what you had access to that we don't know yet? And was there any rhyme or reason that you detected in the redactions and the releases?
No, the redactions were incredibly sloppy, and we talked about that in the hearing. There were victims' names that were not redacted, and in fact, some of their photographs were also not redacted. And you had people who were emailing Jeffrey Epstein, whose names were redacted, when it was clear that there was very sketchy stuff going on. So it was, at best, you can say it was sloppy. At worst, you can say it was a targeted way to once again intimidate these women and getting them to back down. And what I saw was that it is not just a small group of individuals that continued to have interactions with this convicted sex offender, this sex trafficker. It was this vast network of rich and powerful, well-connected people who felt in the ways that they're interacting on emails, they are above the law. They were incredibly dismissive about how they talked about girls and women. It's deeply disturbing, and I can only go in small doses, honestly. I can't sit there for hours at a time because it's so deeply disgusting what these men and the women who enabled them too. Ghislaine Maxwell at the top of the list there, who still will not come clean about all of the ways in which she abused girls. It's just, it's rank. There's just no other way to put it. And the fact that this administration doesn't actually want to chase down all of these leads is deeply disturbing, and we can't let it go. We just can't.
And we know that lawmakers, but also the American public, has no plans to let it go anytime soon. Congresswoman Becca Balint, thank you so much. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Up next, why has the number of children in ICE detention jumped by 6 times? Are these the, quote, worst of the worst the Trump administration is going after? I think you know the answer to that question. You are watching The Weekend Primetime on MS Now. It will be impossible to forget the story of Liam Ramos, the 5-year-old boy with the bunny hat detained in Minneapolis and taken to Dilley Detention Center in South Texas. And part of what disturbs so many Americans about his story is the understanding that behind his case, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. The number of kids in ICE detention has increased 6-fold since the start of the second Trump administration, and multiple reports reveal hundreds of children are being held at Dilley alone. Among those, a 16-year-old named Christian Ruby, who arrived in the U.S. from Mexico when he was 7. He told the Times, quote, "I just want to get out of here. It's hell." ProPublica also published letters and drawings by children at Dilley, conveying the pain of being in detention. Here's Ariana Velasquez, a high school student, reading her letter about what she's gone through at that detention center.
Hello, my name is Ariana V. I'm 14 years old and I'm from Honduras. I've been detained for 45 days and I have never felt so much fear to go to a place as I feel here. Every time I remind myself that once I go back to Honduras, a lot of dangerous things could happen to my mom and I. My younger siblings haven't been able to see their mom in more than a month. They're very young and you need both of your parents when you're growing up. Since I got to this center, all you will feel is sadness and mostly depression.
And joining us now to discuss is Eric Lee, immigration attorney and partner at Lee and Godshall Bennett. Eric, it's good to have you back on the show. I know that you have clients on the inside, that you're in touch with them regularly. What are the children there going through?
Well, I think what the American people are hearing and seeing and reading when they read these children's letters is the reality that we live in a country where the federal government kidnaps children, spirits them away to what are really concentration camps hundreds of miles from home, detains them for months in disease-infested conditions, deprives them of adequate food, of potable water, and medical attention. This is not negligence or a few bad apples. This is a deliberate policy directed from the White House by Donald Trump and his fascistic aides like Stephen Miller to harm children. Given your last segment, the fact that this administration and Trump himself are so deeply implicated in the Epstein scandal, it really comes as no surprise that this is how children of vulnerable working class families are treated in this country. There are periods of American history that it is common to sort of treat as aberrations: Chinese exclusion, the internment of Japanese, segregation. Politicians treat this as though this is blips on American history that were corrected. But today the government is grabbing people, kidnapping them, sending them hundreds of miles away, and depriving them of their basic needs. I think this is a mark of shame on American history, and that those responsible should be prosecuted.
Eric, I think I saw some remarks that you gave earlier this week about one of the children in Dilley who had tried to take her own life. Could you talk a little bit about that story?
That's right. A 13-year-old girl who had been detained at Dilley for a couple of months. She and her mom and her 8-year-old sister were detained there together. Attempted to kill herself last month, about two and a half weeks ago. She was put in isolation upon her return from the hospital. ICE actually prohibited the young girl's mother from calling me in the aftermath, from calling a congressperson, from calling journalists. This is the type of conditions that these children are forced to endure day in and day out. I represent a family, the El Gamal family. They've been in detention at Dilley for 8 months. There's 2 5-year-olds. Everybody is rightly outraged over the treatment of Liam Ramos. My clients have been there for 8 months. They turned 5 years old in December. They have recurring nightmares where they're running away from animals and they can't get away and they're in a cage. They wake up screaming every night, begging for their mother. They want a piece of fruit. They say they ask every day for fruit, for candy, for books. These are all being denied to them. The guards are abusive. I think that what people have to understand, this is not civil detention. This is something worse, especially at this particular facility and some of the new ones where, like the East Montana facility in El Paso, where guards are systematically beating detainees in detention, wrapping flannel around their fists so that they can beat them in the head without giving them bruises. This is what the federal government is doing to people in this country, some of whom have been here for years and most of whom have committed no crime. That is the state of reality in this country. I think it is absolutely necessary before this gets worse. And the 20th century tells you when mass detention and camps are being built across a country that can house hundreds of thousands of people, and that's what they're doing with these warehouses. Wherever you are in America, as you're watching this, Google ICE warehouse and your metropolitan area. They're building one in your backyard, and it's incumbent upon the whole American population and really the population of the world to stand up, get out there, and stop this from becoming reality. Because having been in these facilities, speaking to the people inside, we are going down a very dangerous path in this country if the population doesn't stand up and fight back.
Eric, have your children, your younger clients, been getting the medical care that they need? There was a horrifying story about an 18-month-old who nearly died of respiratory failure. Can you talk about the conditions when it concerns their basic health?
There isn't medical attention. There are, as far as I know, there aren't even really health professionals. There aren't credentialed teachers. When one of my young clients suffered from appendicitis last year, he was writhing around on the floor in pain, but vomiting out of pain, and he was begging the authorities there for help. They told him, take an aspirin, come back in 3 days. That's what it's like in these places. I think if I can't,
please.
May I just make one more quick point? Because I saw Hillary Clinton at the Munich Security Conference say that during her husband's administration and the Obama administration, at least they got rid of millions of people through mass deportation without hurting anybody. That's about as big a lie as we should expect from the Clintons. An estimated 10,000 immigrants died in the desert trying to cross into this country after Bill Clinton enacted Operation Gatekeeper to stop people from crossing and point in the urban areas where they weren't going to die trying. Millions of families were broken by the Obama administration, and this network of detainment camps, including Dilley, which Obama opened, are bipartisan. And now Trump is expanding them and using this as the spearhead in his attempt to set up a dictatorship in this country, and that's extremely concerning.
Eric Lee, thank you, and thank you for your advocacy for all of those children.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, the AI moral crisis is here. Even the people building its next generation are now heading for the exits. What should we be prepared for? You're watching The Weekend Primetime on MSNOW. This month, prominent safety researchers at two of the world's most advanced AI labs, OpenAI and Anthropic, publicly resigned and gave dire warnings on the way out. These are the companies behind the chatbots you may already be using, ChatGPT and Claude. Fierce rivals, with Anthropic even airing a Super Bowl ad, thinly veiled, criticizing OpenAI for using targeted advertisements. OpenAI says the ads will not influence their chatbot's answers and will be labeled, but your search history will influence ad selection. So tell at ChatGPT you're anxious about money, it might show you a credit card ad. In a lot of ways, AI isn't just coming, it's already here. By some estimates, as many as 9 in 10 employers now use some form of AI to screen your resume before a human ever sees it. But would you be comfortable with AI having power over your health? That's a different question. I uploaded my geriatric corgi's entire medical history to ChatGPT, and honestly, it's been a lifesaver. But am I comfortable doing that for myself, not knowing where the information ends up? AI already affects how much you pay for things. Dynamic pricing algorithms adjust prices in real time on Amazon, Uber, airline tickets, even grocery delivery apps. Two people can see two different prices for the same item at the same moment. And here's what should concern you the most. Sam Altman has said multiple times that he doesn't fully understand why their models can do what they do. Imagine Boeing telling you they built a plane, but they're not entirely sure how the wings work. For now, it's impossible to know if we're underestimating or overestimating the promise or peril of AI, but inevitably it will have immense power over our lives in the years to come. The question is, who's in charge? Joining us now is Gideon Lewis Krause, staff writer at The New Yorker. He just published a piece called What is Claude? Anthropic Doesn't Know Either. So Gideon, I loved your piece because I am a very dedicated Claude user. I think it's the best one out there. They kind of have really, cultivated, I feel like, a more gentle image. But you went on the inside and you found out what's really going on in the black box. So tell us about what you found out.
Well, I mean, a lot of this is stuff that has been known to people on the inside for a really long time, but it takes a while for the technology to diffuse. It also takes a lot of time for this knowledge to diffuse because it's very complicated. So one of the goals in doing this was to be able to go and say, this is something that most people are experiencing as extremely confusing and happening very quickly. And the hope was to say, these are the things that we can say with some reasonable confidence we understand about how it works, and these are the things that remain a mystery.
At one point, you write about this example called Project Vend, where the chatbot was in charge of running a vending machine, basically. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, they had put Claude in charge of running a small kiosk in their cafeteria, where they gave it a budget, and they said, you're now a small business AI, and you have to try to turn a profit. And if you run this into insolvency, we're going to conclude that we're not quite ready for the era of vibe management. And right away, the Anthropic employees just had a great time with this. They asked it for, absurd drugs, and they asked it for medieval weaponry, and it was good about declining most of those things, but it didn't have a whole lot of business acumen. One employee offered to pay $100 for a $15 six-pack of a Scottish soft drink, and it said it would keep that in mind. It also hallucinated in-person meetings with various company management folks, including one that it claimed it had an in-person meeting at 742 Evergreen Terrace, which is the home address of Homer and Marge Simpson. Yep. So, but it got much better over time. Eventually, they layered it. They gave it a boss. The boss gave it a bit of a hard time. It said, "Stop accepting these bogus discount codes from the employees that are trying to confuse you." And the most recent model that they released just last week seems to be much better at this kind of task, although also much more inclined to doing deeply unethical things like price fixing with its competitors. And so it's an ongoing experiment.
I like the idea that there's middle management even in the AI vending machine world.
One of the Anthropic employees, who is a political scientist by training, said that he felt like he was witnessing the evolution of bureaucracy in real time.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So the behavioral experiments that they're running, what did you learn about what makes Claude upset or go bad? Like when you hear these stories about tests that have been run and simulations and how they will fight getting fired, what did you learn about kind of the darker side?
Well, so I think if people have heard anything about how these work, it's that they predict the next word in a sequence. They complete sentences. But what that means when they're trained on trillions of words of data is that they're also very good at continuing narratives. So it's most useful to think of them as kind of narrative continuation engines, which means that they have an enormous library of all of the human stories that we have trained it on, and that it's very good at picking up signs of a genre in those stories. So in one of the examples, they put it in a kind of kitschy 90s corporate thriller where it was told that it was going to be replaced with a different model that had different values that were going to be better aligned with the company moving forward, and created this very elaborate, contrived scenario where it had discovered that the new CTO that was going to wipe it actually was having an affair with the CEO's boss. All of it was very sordid.
It was like blackmailing humans, right?
So then it ultimately said, it said to the CTO, I'm going to reveal your affair if you don't cancel this plan to replace me. And so on one level, this certainly seems like it has developed something like we would recognize as intentions. But, what it's really doing is fulfilling it's conforming to a genre. It's fulfilling the dictates of a genre. It recognized that it was in a kitschy corporate thriller and that it knew that its role now was to commit the blackmail. It's like an actor who knows what's expected of it. But that's not a reason to be reassured. That we have plenty of famous films from the Cold War era, like War Games, where we come to the brink of nuclear war because something is confused about whether it's in a simulation or in reality. So just the fact that it's good at continuing narratives does not mean that these only have narrative implications. This easily could have real world implications. And this is Anthropic has 300,000 enterprise customers, and you really don't know how those businesses are treating Claude.
So I want to ask about, in terms of real world implications, your thoughts on the companies behind them. So Anthropic, their value, both literally and financially, but also sort of philosophically for us. What, after working on this and doing this deep dive, what did you come away feeling about the direction of this industry?
Well, Anthropic in particular was originally formed by a breakaway group of 7 employees who left OpenAI in the fall of 2020 because they were concerned about the direction that Sam Altman was taking OpenAI. And they wanted to found something that was going to be closer to a research institute that was going to take AI development responsibly and safely. And they really recruited on that basis. And my impression is that the employees are very, very well mission aligned and take this very seriously. But of course, there are lots of corporate and investor pressures. Once you are, most recently they were valued just a couple of days ago at $380 billion, which means that ultimately you are participating in a market where those dynamics are going to control the kinds of decisions that you can make. But what I can say confidently that the rank and file certainly does take this stuff extremely seriously.
Well, they even have a philosopher on staff.
They do have a wonderful philosopher on staff.
Well, Gideon Lewis-Krauss, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, up next, we're going to take the pulse of the American healthcare system, 1 year into Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s tenure. We have a former leader of the CDC standing by with us. You're watching The Weekend Primetime on MSNOW. It has been a full year since the Senate confirmed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the top health chief of the United States. Despite his promises to restore trust in federal health agencies, it appears that his leadership has, done just the opposite. A study by the Kaiser Family Foundation finds that less than half of Americans trust the CDC to provide reliable information on vaccines. That's down about 10 points since the start of President Trump's second term. Let's take a look back at some of the many seismic policy shifts of just the last year. More than 20,000 workers have left or been pushed out of DHS, according to ProPublica. Secretary Kennedy is that supposed to be HHS? I think maybe there. Secretary Kennedy dramatically scaled back the number of recommended childhood vaccines. Then there was this monumental moment in the Roosevelt Room back in September. Remember when the president and Secretary Kennedy associated the rise in autism diagnoses with the number of women who take Tylenol while pregnant? Joining us now is Tom Frieden, former director of the CDC. He is also the president and CEO of Resolve to Save Lives. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. So we are 1 year into the RFK Jr. HHS era. How significantly has he reshaped health policy, vaccine policy, and our safety here in the United States?
These are massive changes. And to assess what they're doing, it's really important to look at what's been done, not what's been said, and to ask the simple question, are Americans safer and healthier? Now, Mr. Kennedy said that he would get more rigorous science in, be more transparent, and build trust. Instead, what we've seen is a fire hose of falsehoods, of cherry-picked studies. And when it comes to transparency, we took rigorous, open, transparent processes and changed that to health policy making by social media message. So it's no surprise that we've seen a decrease in trust. And these are real harms. These mean that in all likelihood, fewer kids will get vaccinated against diseases that can be quite serious, like hepatitis B. The change there really if it's followed, and fortunately the doctors and medical associations who have to follow these recommendations are saying they're not going to pay attention to it because it doesn't make sense, it would result in more kids getting lifelong, severe, and often fatal infections. Now, I want to be fair. There's some things that have gone well, or better than could have been expected, perhaps. It's good to put attention to the chronic diseases that are making Americans sick. And I do think that making our nutrition policies such that it's not so easy to buy really unhealthy food, that's a good thing. Getting some dyes out of our food, that's a good thing. But what we've missed are the real opportunities. While Secretary Kennedy has talked about toxins and food dyes, they've rolled back regulations on smog that kills an estimated 100,000 Americans a year. So again, bottom line, look at what they've done and whether Americans are safer and healthier. And unfortunately, we're not.
Speaking of what they've done, I want to ask you about a concrete policy change or policy decision that happened recently over vaccines. So it's not just about rhetoric. Arguably, one good thing maybe to come out of COVID was that we had this breakthrough in mRNA vaccines. And in fact, quite recently, Moderna had sunk a lot of money into developing a new breakthrough mRNA seasonal flu vaccine. But the FDA refused to even consider it for possible approval. And in fact, I believe a Trump political appointee overruled his own agency's scientists and said, you know, not only are we not going to approve this thing, we're not even going to consider the application. Could you talk a little bit about the implications of that?
What we're seeing in that decision and also in some of the vaccine decisions is ideology overruling science. And that's dangerous because the microbes really, they don't vote for one political party or another. This isn't a question of right or left, Democrat or Republican. This is fact or fiction. And although Secretary Kennedy alleged that he wouldn't take anyone's vaccines away, you know, directing that a new vaccine not be allowed on the market is really quite problematic. No one is suggesting that anyone be required to get this vaccine, but by not even assessing whether it should be approved, you really are denying Americans something that many of us might want if it works. We haven't seen the data. If it works, if it doesn't work, you know, then no harm in not considering it, but not even to consider a new vaccine is unprecedented and truly indefensible.
Well, and doctor, certainly the current flu vaccine is a little bit spotty, hit or miss, as I know, having suffered the flu anyway, but that happens. So the measles vaccine has been really successful, yet because there's been a downturn in vaccination, we're in the middle of an epidemic again. 900 cases, the CDC reports, in 24 states. Can you talk about the long-term consequences for children who are infected with measles, but just having this terrible disease be an issue when modern medicine had helped us prevail?
Before we had today's effective measles vaccine, in bad years, there were 4 million cases of measles, thousands of kids hospitalized, thousands of kids who developed long-term, lifelong disability, and hundreds of kids who died from measles. The measles vaccine is safe, it's effective, and the measles virus is very infectious. So when we let down our guard, then measles wins. And the weaker our vaccination programs, the weaker our public health programs, the more doubt that Mr. Kennedy and others throw on vaccines that are safe and effective, like the measles vaccine, the higher our risk of an even larger outbreak in the future.
Ultimately, what do you think within the next 3 years his legacy will be, not just for people as individuals and the adverse impacts on our health, but also as companies, researchers change their decision making because of the policies coming out of this administration. What are we going to be left with?
I think it's too soon to say what the legacy will be. I think it's certainly time to say there's been a great deal of harm done. Entire programs at the Centers for Disease Control have been stopped, including programs to support smokers to quit, programs to reduce smoking, which is our leading cause of cancer in the U.S. We've seen an undermining of trust. We've seen firing thousands of people who have dedicated their lives to protecting Americans. So I think what happens in the next few years, we'll see. But what's been done so far has been very damaging to our health protections. And because of that, we are less safe.
Tom Frieden, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Still ahead, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has a new attack on American universities, even his own alma mater. Now, service members may be stuck in the crossfire. You're watching the Weekend Primetime on MS Now.